Bob Kowalczyk, was once described by John Anderson as someone who often doesn't know where he's at, but is always deeply there. Bob is going to tell us a story entitled From Krakow to Papa John's and Back.
Can I sing a song before my 10 minutes begin? Okay, this is special. I'm going to sing a song. The problem is, Barbara, as you well know, I can't sing. So I'm just going to kind of recite the song. It's a song that somebody will pick up, hopefully, very quickly. Okay? A group of very lonesome and quarrelsome heroes was smoking out along the open road. Anyone know it? The night so very dark and thick between them, each man beneath his ordinary load. I'd like to tell my story, said one of them so young and bold. I'd like to tell my story, because I think I'm turning into gold. But no one really could hear him. The night so dark, thick, and green. Well, I guess that these heroes still live there, where you and I have only been. I'd like to tell my story, said one of them so young and bold. I'd like to tell my story, because I think I'm turning into gold. Well, except for my beer, there's not much gold up here. Nobody knows that? No. A bunch of lonesome. Leonard Cohen. Of the third album. Okay. Let's go to Krakow, and then to Papa John's, and back to Krakow. Okay, I'll do this as quickly as possible. In 1990, March, I was in Krakow, Poland, and I was visiting a friend, Janusz Schmidt, who was working at the university there. And he had invited me to come there, and I came, and I also had another mission, kind of a mission behind the mission. And that was to bring my grandfather's dirt from my grandfather's grave back to Poland. He left Poland in the late 1800s, and we had no more connection with the family. We did have his birth certificate, and we did have a letter from Poland. That's all I had. So I took this dirt and I gave it to Janusz, and I said, can you help me find my grandfather's grave? You know this is common things for me, right? Yeah, okay. But that's not the story. Because it was just too problematic at that point. So, I said, okay, Janusz, I've got an idea. Instead of going back the way I came from London, I'm going to travel to Moscow. And then I'm going to get on the Trans-Siberian, and I'm going to cross Russia to Vladivostok. And then I'll come back to Japan that way. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and said, Bob, don't do it. Please don't do it. Of course, he had been under Russian occupation for many years, his country. Of course, he had been to Moscow a number of times, a very dangerous city. 1990 was particularly dangerous because it was the transition period. I said, okay, I'm going. I said, don't worry about me. So I took the late night plane. I got into the airport in Moscow. And a Cleveland bus station was better than that airport. I mean, there was nothing there. It was empty. I got in just after midnight. And the only thing in the airport was a small plastic chair. And there was one desk with a little light and a girl sitting there. And I walked over to her. I said, hotel. I'd like a hotel. Please understand, it's a deserted, dark, grubby airport. And she said, oh, okay, just a minute. And she looked it up. $375. That's expensive now. In 1990, it was a fortune. I said, no thanks, I'll just sit on this chair for the night. So I sat in the chair for the night. I couldn't sleep because I was afraid. There were a lot of really dangerous-looking characters walking around. And a lot of them were drunk. And I went to Moscow the next day. I'll cut this part of the story very short. It was one of the worst days of my life. One of the worst days of my life. Harassed by people, troubled by long lines. Finally, to end it all off, I got to the train station, waited 2 hours in the rain to get in to buy my ticket on the Trans-Siberian. And the man looked at my passport and said, "Your visa 1 week, Trans-Siberian 8 days. Yeah." So I'm thinking, you know, Janusz was right. This place is real crowded. You know? This is first impressions. That's why I'm telling you a story. So I went back to tell you the truth, I ran out of there with my tail tucked between my legs. I was really frightened. And I went to the airport, got my Visa card. I said, "I don't care how much the plane costs, get me back to Tokyo." 320,000 yen. Burn, burn, burn. Okay, fast forward, all right, 2 years later, 1992. I'm sitting in the kitchen with John Anderson and Stuart Wax. Many of you know these people. And Mark Willis. And we're drinking and talking. And I said, "I got this crazy idea. I'd like to go back to Russia. And I'd like to do some interviews there with the people and photograph the people." And I'll never forget, I can still see him now. John leaned across the table, put his finger right at me and said, "Do it." And I replied, "How about you?" 3 weeks later, we were on a plane to go to Warsaw, where we met Janusz again. He still thought I was crazy going back to Russia. And we took a long train ride into Moscow, 24-hour train ride. I want to make this as succinct as possible, but it's so hard because we stayed there for 2 weeks. Oh, very important part, Didion. I think many of you know Didion also. He put us in contact with some Russians, which made all the difference in the world. We had an apartment, a huge apartment, for $10 a night. We had professors from Moscow State University as translators, as interpreters, for $10 a day. And they gave their heart. They became our Russian sisters, basically. And for 2 weeks, we went all around Moscow, taking photographs, interviewing people. We interviewed millionaire. We worked separately. John worked with Natasha, and I worked with Liana. We went all around Moscow for 2 weeks straight, 14 days. And we interviewed all Russians from all walks of life, including a millionaire, a 14-year-old prostitute, a philosopher, rock musicians, a man who lived underground. I can't possibly explain what an incredible experience it was. It was also very dangerous because the Russians were angry, and there were a number of dangerous moments. So that first impression of Russia was totally wrong. And I don't... If you remember these old Kyoto journals, okay? This is Kyoto Journal number 20. And that was the first installment of our trip to Russia. Okay? And then Kyoto Journal number 21. I went back in June of that year to cover demonstrations. Okay? And then the third one, John went back in September and did this. Voices from Moscow, part 3. And the final one was a series of 4 articles, was in Kyoto Journal number 23. What I'm trying to say is, first of all, first impressions are, of course, very dangerous. You can do the opposite, right? You can really like somebody, and you can really get screwed with that person, right? But the impression I had of Russia was absolutely terrible. And it was implanted into my mind by Janusz in Krakow. So it's best to take time, you know, with things. I went back 5 or 6 times. John went 3 or 4 times back. We felt like Moscow was our home. And Papa John's, how did I come to this? Now, do you remember? You remember this?
Oh, the show you did.
Yeah, the show. Charles, after we got back, we went over to Papa John's further north in Kalasuma. And Charles says, "How about a show of photographs and things?" So we did, and I'm going to put this someplace where people can see it, because if you take a good look at this, this is of course not the photographs. The photographs are framed and well done. But this is the intensity of our experience in Russia. We were blessed, and Russia became a home. When we left Moscow after 2 weeks, we took the train from Moscow to St. Petersburg to Helsinki. And we were extremely tired, we were filthy, we were dirty. We got off the train in Helsinki, and John was going to go to the continent, and I was going to go to London. And we went to the bus station where I would take the bus to the airport. And we gave each other a big Russian bear hug, because it was such an experience. I got on the bus. I sat down on the bus. And the woman next to me turns to me and said, she looks out the window at John again, looks at me. She said, "Were you two in prison together?" All I did was go. So, you know, I so much appreciate Russia now and its people that I haven't been there for a few years, but hopefully I'll go back sometime. So please be careful of first impressions, because you could be totally wrong. Last thing was, 16 years later, from 1990 to 2006, finally, I found my cousin, Stanislaus Kowalczyk, in a little town called Muzewo, between Gdansk and Warsaw. He was a town drunk.